So, are we just going to chuck it in the bin? Or are we going to use it?
I'll be using the sheaves and stuff out of it.
This is some expensive stuff on there.
Right, so let's talk about the mast. We haven't spoken much about the mast. Everyone knows we got a carbon one and that it was actually recycled, made out of an old America's IACC, International America's Cup class mast that was going in the bin. But we haven't actually talked about it a whole lot, because most of the footage of me building this thing we lost. We had a hard drive die, and all the footage of me taking this thing apart, designing how it would work around the existing stuff that I had, all disappeared on a hard drive that's sitting in the cupboard, not working. So, decisions I had to make when I was designing and building this. To rotate or not to rotate, that is the question. Well, to be honest, it was pretty easy. This thing, rotating or not rotating, was sitting on a mast ball. The reason I was going to put it on a mast ball is that the ball allows for movement in the mast step in all directions. When you put a mast foot on it, things get a little bit trickier, particularly with a multi-hull, and I wasn't sure how stiff the platform was, so how much it would lay off to leeward and all the rest of it. So the mast ball was the solution, the safe solution, rotating or non-rotating. The difference between making this mast rotating or non-rotating, and I can actually make this mast non-rotating, is I put another fitting right here in front of the mast ball, basically a great big tang that sits up, and then I would glue a socket or bolt a receiving thing to the inside of the front of the mast here that basically just stops it from rotating. Super simple. And that's a fairly common method of making a non-rotating multi-hull mast in big boat world. Right. In the end, it was like, oh well, we've got the ball, we've got everything, we'll make it rotating, because this is actually a really big mast for our little boat. And when I say big, I don't mean tall, I mean chord wise. So from the leading edge to the trailing edge of the mast, it's pretty darn big. It's no little toy. It's a pretty serious piece of kit. And there is quite a lot of square meters there. And when it's blowing 50 plus knots, because for some reason I've cocked up and we're in a big storm, that is the new mainsail. It is a lot of windage, it's a lot of sail area, and for me it was actually a case of I want to control it for safety reasons, so let's make it rotating. Oh, to control that, we then needed a spanner to do it. Putting a standard spanner out the front was not an option. You can see here, if I put a spanner out here with rotation lines, one, where would I get the rotation lines back to the cockpit? Two, it would stick out and catch everything and everyone's legs, interfere with the lockers, blah blah blah. Obviously I couldn't go behind because I have windows and hatches, and again getting lines, so I had to come up with these. Now these wings are my rotation spanner thingies, and they are great in that they are also steps, because one of the issues with the last boat was getting up onto the cabin, last mast was getting from down here up there. So this provided an excellent step. You can see the skateboard deck grip non-skid. Awesome. This is I would even put, even if it was non-rotating, I'd put these back on again. They're awesome. And for parking the halyards out here is great. I had this great idea of parking the halyards on these inner ones, but they're too close and you get too much halyard slap, so they're a bit redundant. The aft one's okay for the inner forestay because it wraps around the mast tight enough that it doesn't get too much of a flap on, but that was a no buenos. So we actually parked the halyards out here on the rotation lines on each side. So you'll see masthead there and, oh sorry, masthead there and fractional here. So we park them on that line. There is an upgrade coming for the rotation in that there will be a glued on pad in the middle of the boat where those lines are, so I can get a little bit more purchase on the rotation, and at the higher rotation angles the pull of the line is a better angle bedangle. When this rotates, this spanner arm, this pulling point actually comes all the way in here and starts just sort of pulling backwards and not rotating, so it's a bit harder to get the last bits of rotation out of the mast when we're rotating. So there's an upgrade that's intended that I'll make another pulling point in the center of the cabin top there, something nice and simple. Yeah, so that's our rotation. Now let's go and have a look at, and you can see scratches and bangs. We have a titanium T-ring on the clew of the jib. Never put a titanium T-ring on the clew of your jib. Always go webbing. It just trashes your lovely mast. Gooseneck. This is the gooseneck from the cup boat. So is it too big? Abso-freaking-lutely. It is 100 times too big for this boat. But it came with the mast. It had nice features like the Cunningham going through the main pin, so the Cunningham things were good. It's all titanium and aluminium and all the rest of it, so our big mega behemoth huge gooseneck is probably lighter than most people's little tiny tinky stainless steel one. Am I ever going to break this? Never, never, ever, 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 ever. This thing is bulletproof and then some, you know. We got M10 titanium bolts bolting this in place, and there's what, 1 2 3 4 5 6 12 of them, plus it's all potted, you know. That's never moving or leaving the whole thing. Yeah, so that was a nice sort of score and recycle. Likewise, this huge big titanium pad eye on the bottom here. Yeah, big gear. But it's kind of nice in knowing that nothing's ever going to break. All the little slots and everything, obviously I had to make and build and put all this and think of where it was all going to run so that everything, you know, runs fairly neatly and flush back as much as possible. Yeah, it's, I don't know how I can explain it. I did it. That's what I did, and that's what I did. Track, well, the track was existing as well, so it had a 26mm track on it, and it was like, oh, that's too big. Did I change it? Heck no, because one, it'd be too much work to pull all that track off, and two, I knew that it was going to be grunty enough. And why did I go with a lowers type arrangement and not putting a single spreader on there? Well, that was a heavily debated thing in my mind as to what to do there. Weight wise, I didn't make massive gains. Weight wise, I came in, I think, 50 kilos lighter, which is, you know, is not to be sneezed at. 50 kilos lighter is 50 kilos lighter. But what I was gaining was aerodynamic efficiencies. So I had a double diamond spreader setup where there was a triangle style diamond on the bottom third and a double diamond spreader on the upper third of the lower panel, and that had 1 2 3 4 5 6 wires involved with it. and the aerodynamic drag from that was significant. So if you look here, my aerodynamic drag is actually fairly low. I've got the 2 side stays, the 2 lowers, the lazies, and the halyards when I park them out of the way. This thing's clean, and it was really noticeable at anchor. When we're anchoring and in high winds, we definitely notice the reduction in drag on the pull on the chain. That was a big win and a very noticeable thing that we gained. Going spreaders or lowers, well, this was a super simple. I put 2 holes and dog bones up there, put the lowers down to there, job done. So it was an easy, simple solution for the build. And the mast tube is so stiff fore and aft that it was just saying go that direction. I could put diamonds on there, but the fore and aft stiffness is so high on this that the requirement to pre-bend the bottom end of the tube just isn't there. So I didn't go down that way. Also, having to put spreaders and things on there meant more work, as in gluing and attaching stuff, you know, spreader roots and all the rest. It's just a whole lot of extra complications. Up there right at the top, we've got a fractional and a masthead. The fractional is at the perfect height as far as the fractional halyard's concerned, and the setup is really nice. The one thing I would change is the masthead. I would bring the masthead down. My opportunities for running proper masthead gear are fairly low, and the ass puckery moments when the mast is loaded up and how much it bends is too high and too frequent when we're running it. I would bring my masthead down to my orange band, which is about halfway up the tip. So that's something I would change in the future, or if I was doing it again. Okay, you can see up there our masthead units. We have 2 masthead wind units. Why would I do that, you would ask? Well, it's pretty simple. Because I had it, is one. But more importantly, redundancy. Wind instruments are pretty important, especially if you're running autopilots. We use the wind vane feature always on this boat, because we sail, you need to use the wind vane, and the autopilot sails the boat, do the sails. So it's super important for us that our wind vanes are working and that we had redundancy. Also, you'll see that the wind one up there is a really tall one. And why would we do that? It's not to look cool like all the race boats. It has a very specific function. It takes the wind instrument away from the mast and away from the sail. And you notice it when you're sailing really deep downwind, the lower wind wand will actually park up, particularly with the wind speed, because it's partly shadowed by the mainsail and the mast when you're running deep downwind. And the upwash from the mainsail is actually really noticeable when you're running downwind. Our unit that's right at the top there doesn't suffer from it at all. It's up and out there in the clear air, so we've got clean air and clean wind direction all the time. That's super cool. Trouble is, that's a very expensive unit. Here is my recycled Barlow winch from the old mast. This is as old as the boat. Had to machine up some new parts and bits when we were in Valencia to keep this whole thing going. I would love to have put a nicer, fancier one on, but to be honest, I'm actually pretty glad I was actually able to recycle or keep this one going, because yeah, it doesn't have to go in the bin, we can still use it. So obviously a whole winch base pad and everything I had to make and bond and laminate on here, and this is all drilled and tapped into the thing, no nuts and bolts. You know, this is all completely serviceable in situ. I can unbolt this winch from the outside, take it away, and not have to try and stick my arms up inside, etc, etc. So super cool. And why is it on the mast and not back there? Well, if I'm going up the mast, if we're hoisting spinnakers and code zeros and things like that, or even the jib, that is all done from up here. And if I'm short-handed because it's 9 o'clock at night and the kids are asleep and Anna's off watch and I'm out here by myself, I don't want to be trying to run back in there while I'm doing work with the sail up here. It's all close and handy, and I will actually, particularly when I'm dropping sails, have the halyard on the winch, unclutched, dropping sail. I'm now on the trampoline here and looking for the sail I'm dropping, and I can actually control the rope in my hand while I'm dropping the sail all at the same time. It doesn't matter whether it's a cat or a yacht. This is one of the things I set up, like for Marcus on his Luffy 45, for putting his staysail up and down, that it was all done in the vicinity of where he was working, and that was the decision why I put the winch on here and the clutches for those forward halyards on here. But you'll notice I didn't put the reefing here. All the reefing and the furling of the headsail is done in there, where you spend the majority of time to reef and furl the headsail. That's all done in there, because that's day-to-day running of the machine. When you're running things like your spinnakers and that, that's not day-to-day. That's the weather's come good and everything's good, so you can come up forward, and it's safe to come up forward and do so. Down the bottom here, this is actually the halyard for the staysail. This is the only bad weather sail that you have to come forward for to hoist. It's not done in the cockpit, but this doesn't get done very often, and when it is up, it is on the lock. So once it's on the lock, that's it, you're back there, and then the sheets will then go back to the cockpit and the furling lines back to the cockpit, so that can go away. Yeah. And some of you who are watching closely will be going, well, where's the jib halyard chain? So let's have a look. We got my 3 reef lines here, main halyard here, topping lift here, Cunningham here. All right, but no jib halyard. Let's have a look around this side. Who's going to spot the jib halyard? This is the fractional halyard. This is the masthead halyard. Still no jib halyard. So where is it? Right. This is my jib halyard in here. Right, there you go. That snap shackle there is holding on to a piece of Dyneema here. And that is my head sail halyard. So how do I get that on and off, you're asking? Well, it's pretty simple actually. So there's what I call a halyard tail. It's basically one of these ropes spliced on the end, and it's got a piece of 2mm Dyneema on it that lashes to this, and that lashed rope will then go through this eye here and then back up to the winch. This eye here, up through this hole here and around the winch. That way I can then pull tension into the halyard. Once the halyard is pulled tight, I can pull the ring on the snap shackle here. That opens the snap shackle, and the snap shackle comes off the halyard, and I can lower the jib. So how do I get tension in my jib now? Because to get it up, I need to pull it up. Halyard comes down and I clip the snap shackle on. But I don't want to do that with a heap of tension in it. I want to keep it loose. So that's pretty simple. I have a lashing down here where the jib is on the furler. So now I hoist the sail, lock it off in its height position, and then I can actually adjust the luff of my jib with the lashing down here at the bottom. Super simple. Keeps everything nice and neat, reduces the amount of winches and clutches and all that sort of hoo-ha. What if I want to get my jib down in a big hurry, in an emergency and all the rest of it, you're asking? Well, I don't, is the simple answer. The jibs are pretty reliable now. Ours is becoming a lot more unreliable. As you can see, it's in a very second-hand state, but the chances of blowing up a headsail, completely ripping in half and not being able to be let down is very rare, because the luff tape 99% of the time is always there. So for me to go and get my halyard tail, which is in my rope locker there, tie it to there, blow that with the headsail ripped in half and flapping, yeah, it's a pain in the bum, but I just pull the trigger, let it down. Yeah, it does add a little bit of time, but the chances of that happening are very, very low. So that's why I went with that option. I was talking about I have a lock in this mast for the staysail, but then you're asking, well, why wouldn't you put locks for your fractional and your masthead? You've got locks on your mainsail, so why not on these two? Well, it's pretty simple. We don't put locks on loose luff sails. That's just asking for trouble. The reason why that's asking for trouble is loose luff sails are notorious, so that's spinnakers and things like that without a cable in them, are notorious for, one, blowing up, ripping, and being two pieces quite often. And if you have it on lock and you have a sail that is literally being held on by a thread up there, a little tiny luff tape, to get it off the lock is actually quite difficult, because you need to pull up and then you need to pull down to get it out of the lock mechanism. So we don't put it on lock. Also, if there is a situation with the loose luff sail and you need to get it down in a big hurry, and 9 times out of 10, if it's half wrapped around something and something's going pear-shaped, to run forward and blow that clutch is definitely a lot faster than trying to get it off the lock. However, if we were running only code or cable style things, so code zeros and A3s and that were on cables and all the rest of it, I would put locks up there. The reason for that is because I want to actually get luff tension. I want to get that cable tight, and the best way to get that cable tight is to put it on a lock up there and then put the purchase system into it down the bottom here like I did with the trinket. We'd actually do the same thing out the front there, but I haven't designed this boat to be set up like that, so I don't have it. So yeah, there's a few of the thoughts that went into putting this mast together, and why it does what it does and why it looks like it looks. So I'm gonna leave it there.
A little bit late. I nearly forgot. Don't want to get carpet dust all over me, because it gets very, very, very itchy.